Hello and welcome to the fourth session of Baking Made Easy, sponsored by the fabulous Doves Farm. My name is Anthony Clare. I'm a chef and a food writer and a columnist here at the Telegraph. And in this 45-minute baking masterclass, I'm going to be joined by former Bake Off champion. It's all on our minds right now, isn't it? David Atherton. He's known for his healthy alternatives to baking, and David will be demonstrating how to make banana chocolate muffins with benefits by sharing his secret additions. And without further ado, I would like to hand over to David to get started.
Hello there. I'm very excited to be here. Thank you very much for inviting me, Anthony.
Very excited to see you here, David. And what are we cooking today?
We're going to be doing some chocolate muffins. I call them banana chocolate muffins because they do include banana, but they're definitely heavily on the chocolate side.
Yeah. And a little bit healthy?
Yes, I think people might be quite surprised with some of the ingredients. So they definitely have a healthy angle to them, yes. Yeah, that's kind of like how I like to make cakes.
Fantastic. So can I eat them for breakfast? That'd be okay.
I mean, my rule is you can always eat cake for breakfast.
Quite right.
Particularly, yes, these will give you a nice start to the day, yeah. They've got a lot of substance to them as well as just being a cake.
Fantastic. So how are we going to get started?
Cool, yes, let's get straight into it. The first thing we're going to do, I haven't weighed everything out perfectly. You know when you watch those things and everyone just throws it in perfectly and they say you can make it.
So not like real life, is it?
Exactly. So I'm going to do it with you guys. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to get chocolate. So it's 100 grams of chocolate. And I like using really dark chocolate. And darker chocolate.
Chocolate is meant to be better for you, isn't it?
Yes, it is more healthy for you just because it's got less of the kind of the cocoa fats and the milk chocolate fats. But all chocolate is pretty good for you because it's full of polyphenols, which are really good for your microbiome. So yeah, I do like at least 70% cocoa solids, but it's up to your taste. You do not have to do really, really dark chocolate. You can do milk chocolate. You can even do white chocolate if you want to. And we're going to chop.
Sorry, David, I just wanted to ask what your microbiome is.
Oh, microbiome, that's all the good bacteria that lives in your bowel. Well, it's kind of all over your body, but the most of it is in our bowel. And we need to feed those bacteria for lots of good things, for gut health, but also it helps with your mental health and your physical health. And we can definitely talk about that more with the grains we're going to be using. So yeah, if you chop up 100 grams of this chocolate, now a lot of recipes you get chocolate recipes, chocolate cake, all these kind of things with chocolate. And one of the big things for bakers and for chefs is to make something taste truly chocolatey. And I was reading, and I've forgotten which chef it is actually. I was reading, it was from a chef in the States, and they said the only thing you can really do is actually use chocolate and make sure you've got big chunky chunks of chocolate. Because you could put in so much cocoa powder and it still won't have that real chocolatey taste. So one of the things for this, one of the winning things is to have really nice big chunky bits of chocolate.
So how big are you doing them?
Each of my pieces that's this big, I'm chopping just like a classic piece of chocolate. I'm chopping
big.
I'm chopping those into 3 or 4 pieces. And
chunky.
This one, you know, sometimes you can get away with some things where you have a not so great ingredient and it's lifted by the other ones. I would say in this recipe, the chocolate really comes through. So if you want to use nicer chocolate, it's definitely going to taste better.
Okay. Cool. Now I'm going to tell you a secret. I wasn't going to own up to this, but I actually had some leftover liqueur chocolates, and nobody in our family likes liqueur chocolates. So I chopped them up and drained off the liqueur, and I'm going to use that, but there might be just a little bit of liqueur left in them.
Do you know what, when I say really good quality, you're always going to, there's no point using your best quality chocolate, I don't think, because that should just be saved for when you're having a piece of chocolate on its own. So I'm the same as you. I've got a cupboard, I could show you, I've got a cupboard with like old Easter eggy bits and chocolate that, yeah, someone's given me and I don't really like that type of chocolate. And I use that in baking all the time. So yeah, I agree with you actually. Although I also love liqueur chocolates, so you could have just said them wrong.
Oh, next time I will send them your way.
I don't even drink alcohol, but I love liqueur chocolates. Right, so this is going to be added to our mixing bowl. And
wow, we've got a mate. We got Peter from Pennsylvania. We got Christine from Hertfordshire. Duncan from Cardiff in Wales. Cheshire, Kent. Another Kent, County Antrim. Hello, Northern Ireland. Newcastle on Tyne. Vancouver, Canada. Hey, that's so cool. Alberta, Canada. And Spalding, South Lincolnshire, home of British farming. Fantastic stuff. Wow, there are some Dunblane. The great collection of people from all over the world.
We probably do have people that are making these for breakfast as well, then, Xanthi.
This is true.
Yeah. Right.
Oh, we got Carolyn asking. She says she's not keen on banana. Is there something she can use instead of banana?
Yes, you could increase the yogurt and use another egg, because the banana is kind of mimicking egg a lot in this. So we actually use one egg for the cake. But also, you can see it doesn't really taste very banana-y. It really is quite a chocolatey bun. So I don't know if you're very, very sensitive, maybe you could taste it, but it's not a particularly banana-y cake.
Okay, that's cool. Oh, and Sue wants to know if you could bake it all as one big cake. That's a great question, actually.
Yes, I would suggest, yeah, you definitely can. I've done that with this recipe. I've done it as a loaf cake in a loaf tin. And I've also done it
in a 500-gram loaf tin?
Yes. Or if you do the 20-centimeter round cake tins, like the Victoria sandwich type, I would do it in 2 or 3 of those. It'd be really good. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Oh, you could then layer it up.
Yes, with a really good chocolate fudge icing. So into this bowl, we're going to add the rest of the dry ingredients. And one bugbear I have is when people say to sift things to make them light and fluffy. Sifting flour has never been used to make it light and fluffy. It's not scientific. We sifted flour because flour had stones and bugs and bits of wheat and bits of the nasty that you wanted to get out. As soon as you add water to flour or any moisture to flour, any of the air that you've sifted in is not going to help. One reason people do sift flour is to try and disperse, like if you're using a raising agent, is to make sure it gets around all of the flour. And that's important because we'll see later in the cake, you don't really want to overmix the cake. But if you're doing it this way, where you're actually putting all the dry ingredients first, you can just toss them around. So you can sift if you want to, but you really don't need to.
Love that.
130 grams of plain flour, which actually isn't a huge amount for a cake because we've got like other healthy ingredients that are coming later. So yeah, if you do 130 grams of plain flour, one other thing about plain flour, this is not going to apply to our North American friends, but in the UK, plain flour has no regulations. So actually, it really is just like the leftover wheat all thrown together. So you don't know what the protein content is or the quality. So this is a plug. I know that Doves Farm are sponsoring this event, but if you go for more expensive brands like Doves Farm, they have consistency and they're really, really good. Instead of just buying, like if you're making biscuits, you can use a cheap plain flour because you don't know what it's going to be like. But for a cake, I would definitely say go for a better, like well-refined one, or even go for a cake flour, which in the UK, a cake flour is very well-refined. But all-purpose flour in America is kind of more regulated, so you're guaranteed a nice fluffy cake.
Fantastic. And we got a question from Susan asking what adjustments can be made, if any, for diabetics. And also from Anne asking about guidance on reducing the sugar content in favourite old recipes. She says, I do reduce the amount, but I don't want to spoil the balance. Is it just trial and error?
It is trial and error. And that's, I think, one of the things with baking I've noticed, especially when I always notice this with bread, but it applies for everything, is people want a perfect result straight away. And one of the nice things about baking is how experiential it is and how you learn as you go along. And yes, it is going to be trying. There's a lot of really great sugar substitutes now. And some of them act a lot like sugar, but some of them don't. And sugar adds sweetness, but it also has other things, like sugar will make biscuits brown, and they also add to the consistency of a cake. So you can't always just, like my mum would always just reduce half the sugar and then say the recipe wasn't very good. I'm like, well, no, the recipe wasn't designed to have half the sugar removed. But this one does have sugar in it, but you can definitely use a sugar substitute. I think some recipes are more robust, so they can take playing around with, and this is definitely one of those.
That's interesting. So I could use like one brand name is Canderel or xylitol or one of those instead.
Yeah, you definitely can try that. Yeah, you've got to be careful. Like they often tastes sweeter. So like honey, for example, the same amount of honey as sugar, honey actually tastes sweeter to our taste buds. So often with the sweeteners, you don't need to use as much, like you can reduce anyway. Right, the next thing we're going to add is, the raising agent for this cake is baking powder. So we're going to add 2 teaspoons of baking powder. I know a lot of people now are gluten-free, so it's a good time to mention as well, with this recipe, you can definitely use, this is a gluten-free baking powder, and you can definitely use gluten-free flour. So gluten-free flours are usually a mix of different things like rice, and gum and things, and you definitely can use that for this recipe.
Great, good to know.
I'm already just going to kind of toss those together. Then we're going to add 100 grams of a soft brown sugar. Now, this recipe, like I've just said again, it's very robust. You can use whatever sugar you've got. You don't have to use a soft brown sugar. You can use a caster sugar. Soft brown sugar gives a kind of a richer flavor, so I think it's nice for chocolate.
And my brown sugar's got little lumps in. It's been sitting in a jar, and you know how it sometimes gets. Is there any way I can get rid of those lumps? I'm kind of rubbing them out at the moment.
I rub them out, yeah. If you're using a recipe where there's going to be a lot of heat involved, it's not usually so bad. But for this recipe, you don't want to overmix. So I would rub them out, rub them in.
Yeah. Oh, we've got Leanne from Charnio in Crete. Oh, is it gorgeous out there? I'm not sure I want to know. It's so wet and miserable here in England. But she's asking, could you add honey instead of sugar? You have great honey in Crete, I think, as well.
Yes, for this recipe, you definitely can, yeah. Like I say, I would probably, because there's 100 grams of sugar, I would add less honey. This recipe, I mean, it also depends on different things, like how ripe your banana is, because bananas, when they get really ripe, are really sweet. So you don't always need, you can definitely have less sugar in this. Okay, so for dry ingredients, we've got, one thing I want to mention with the dry ingredients as well, Xanthi, is you mentioned about the microbiome, well, I mentioned the microbiome, and you asked me to talk about it, but you can use plain flour that is wholemeal for this recipe as well. So
okay. Yeah, that's good.
In terms of health, so anything that's brown feeds your microbiome, like all of these, they're called indigestible starches. They feed all the bacteria. And so that's things like brown rice, brown pasta. And so wholemeal flour is really good. But you will probably know, those of you who are good bakers out there, that if you make a cake with 100% wholemeal flour, it's going to be quite heavy and stodgy, and it's going to taste not so great. But in terms of feeding your microbiome, you can just sub out 5 or 10% of the highly refined white flour and use some wholemeal flour, and that's going to be healthy. It's going to give you a good feed for your microbiome without compromising the texture of your cake.
So like just take a couple of tablespoons out of the cup and put a couple of tablespoons of wholemeal in instead.
Exactly. And again, blowing the trumpet of the kind of the better quality flour products like Dove's Farm. When Dove's Farm, when they have a wholemeal flour, it's really well refined, so it's really finely ground. So it
doesn't have huge lumps of bran in.
Yeah, which actually isn't very good for cake. So you do want to make sure you get a really finely ground wholemeal flour. Okay, have we? Right, no, we haven't. I was trying to think. I'm trying to remember all the ingredients in my head, which is not a strong point of mine. We're also going to put cocoa powder in. So this is chocolate. So we're going to use 30 grams of cocoa powder as well.
So you're just weighing these straight into the bowl. You've got your bowl on the scales, haven't you?
Yes, yes.
Great idea.
And yeah, digital scales. What did we do? I remember my mum had the proper ounces and ounces ones where you actually use the little weights. And I did enjoy doing it, but there's something so nice about the ease of a digital scale.
They're great. Although I do always think they're kind of magic. I think, how do I trust them?
Yes, yeah.
But they are amazing.
And sometimes if they're slightly running low on battery, you suddenly realize you're pouring and you're thinking, this has definitely gone over the amount.
And yeah, and it sometimes it just goes dead in the middle, and you're like, how much have I added on top of everything else? Yeah. So actually, I have scales now which plug in because I was so fed up with that happening, and they're really great. I love them.
That's a really good idea, because I just changed the battery on this because I just didn't want it to go off in the middle of this live. So this is your chance now to make sure your baking powder is tossed nicely through the mix.
Someone asked, was that 100 grams of cocoa powder? No, it was 30 grams, wasn't it?
Yeah, 30 grams, yeah. Yeah.
And Judith is wondering if she could substitute banana weight for weight for the sugar.
I would say you could try. I've not done that, but I think you could try. I would say with the banana though, if you're substituting the banana, I would say weight for weight, I would do egg and sugar, because the banana gives the binding effect like an egg.
No, so I think it's using banana instead of the sugar. So using extra banana, I guess, instead of the sugar.
Yes, yeah, you probably could. Yeah, I'm sure you could actually.
Would it make it a bit more puddingy?
Yes, you might get. This is already kind of like a chewy, a fudgy kind of cake. So yeah, you kind of get more of that texture again. Yeah. So with baking powder, just to remind people, baking powder is a mixture between bicarbonate of soda, which is an alkali, and then it's got a buffer, and then it's got something like cream of tartar, which is an acid. So when water hits, they actually mix together and they make carbon dioxide. So and I'm telling you that just because we've got something that's going to boost that in the wet ingredients. So now we've got the dry ingredients, we're going to put that aside. For those of you who are like my mum, you might want to add a pinch of salt as well. She will not make any cake without doing a pinch of salt. That is completely up to you.
I'm with your mum.
Yeah. In fact, well, I'm going to do it now as well, just for mum.
There we go. I once knew a French chef who used to say to me, everything sweet, you add a pinch of salt. Everything savoury, you add a pinch of sugar.
Yeah, that's a very, very good tip.
I might quite like that. Yeah.
Okay, so
I've got a quick question. Could you use roasted sweet potato flesh instead of the banana? That would sounds delicious to me.
Yes, you really could. In fact, this recipe is actually from my book called Good to Eat, which is meant to be referencing the fact that the food is good to eat because it's tasty, but also because it's good for you. And you'll find out from my book that I love roasted sweet potato flesh. I've got brioche buns that are made only with roasted sweet potato flesh instead of any fats or sugars and things. So yes, that's a really good idea. You could definitely do it.
What colour are they?
They go really golden and nice, yeah. But we are using sweet potato in this recipe, but actually raw, interestingly. But we'll come to that. So we're going to go for the wet ingredients now, Xanthi. Oh, we've got more questions.
We got, could you use agave syrup and could you use jaggery, both instead of the sugar?
Yes, jaggery will definitely give you a very similar flavour profile to what we're using with the brown sugar. And agave syrup, again, I think agave is twice as sweet as sugar, so you wouldn't need as much. But yeah. So we are going to go for the wet ingredients now. For the wet ingredients in this cake, we're going to blend them. So it's going to be a short blend, but there's going to be a bit where it's going to be quite noisy. So for this, we are going to put in a very ripe banana. Now, banana, I do not give a weight. And the reason I don't give a weight for this one is because it's not as important. But obviously bananas do come in lots of shapes and sizes. But yeah, I would say, do you know what I said I was going to do, and I've already forgotten, is to remind people to actually switch their ovens on and preheat their oven. So this is a good time. There's enough time. Just to let everyone know who's watching, I did it before it started because I know that I'm really bad at forgetting this. So we're going to.
And what's the temperature again?
200 degrees centigrade as a fan oven. And I'm really sorry, North Americans, but you're going to have to Google the Fahrenheit unless you want to know, because I can never remember two temperatures.
400. It's 400 Fahrenheit.
Okay, cool. Ooh, I'm really bad at remembering these things. So, yes, so sorry, going back to the banana. So it doesn't really matter. If the banana was slightly bigger, slightly smaller than kind of the standard size, that's okay for this recipe. So we've got one banana in there. We are going to add 30 grams of natural live yogurt. Now, 30 grams isn't a lot. And the reason
I wondered about this. I thought, worth it?
The reason is because the raising agent is the thing that's actually going to really cause the reaction is the bicarb, which is an alkali. And live yogurt has lactobacillic acid in it, so it's actually slightly acidic. So this will give the raising agent more of a boost, as well as adding a bit of moisture and things to the cake. But it's actually more to give a boost. You could add like a teaspoon of lemon juice as well, or anything that's got a strong acid will give your raising agent more of a fluffy boost.
Well, even with baking powder.
Yes, yeah. You definitely have to do it with bicarb, but just even with baking powder, you just get an extra boost, just like another bit.
And yeah, I used a frozen banana, which I'm hoping is going to be okay. It's kind of gone a bit soggy, but when I have bananas which are going over, I just put them in the freezer.
Yep, and I tested this recipe exactly with that because I got the same. I've got loads of frozen bananas in the freezer.
I know they kind of fall out when you open the freezer door, don't they? But
yeah. Okay,
brilliant.
So next we're going to add 1 large egg.
Oh, somebody's asking, do you have nutritional values for this? This is Rosemary asking, do you have nutritional values for this in the book?
I don't for this one, actually, no. No.
I mean, it does have some carbs in. It's not, you know.
Yeah, it definitely has carbs.
Base your entire diet on. But are carbs evil?
Not at all. Carbs are necessary. I think interestingly, when people talk about the healthy eating debate, one thing that interests me the most is the fact that healthy eating is so often linked to dieting and losing weight. In fact, a lot of the papers that people, the scientific papers, when they're talking about things being healthy, they're actually just talking about how effective they are for people to lose weight. And that's not just what we're talking about with healthy food. Like a cake, you're deciding what calories you want to put in your body. But the great thing about this is there is so many extra things. Like a cake that's made with white flour, butter, sugar, and eggs hasn't got a lot of nutrients in it. Whereas this, yes, it's a bit sweet, and hasn't got as many fats or as many sugars as a normal cake, but it's also got loads and loads of extra goodness things in it as well. Like a banana's full of potassium, sweet potatoes full of vitamin A and fibre. Quinoa is one of the only things that has all 9 essential amino acids that our body needs. So it's kind of, I don't look at health as just, about weight loss. I think it's more about what we're giving to our body and doing for it.
Makes a lot of sense.
Rest of the wet ingredients. So we've got banana, we've got the yogurt, we've got an egg. Vanilla extract. So the one thing to say about vanilla extract is make sure you get extract and not essence. Essence is actually, it's not made from vanilla at all. It's actually a byproduct of the paper industry, and it just has 1 compound, vanillin. Whereas vanilla extract has 230 different flavor compounds in it. So yeah, and the better you get, the better it's going to be. The better it's going to taste. I am going to put about a teaspoon.
But that's fantastic because that's why it's in the wood, isn't it? That's why wine tastes of vanilla when it's been sitting in wood.
Yes, exactly.
That's the vanillin.
Yes, you get the vanillin tones. But yeah, for real vanilla, that depth of flavor is actually loads of different compounds. So then the really left field ingredient now is the stranger one, is quinoa. So
it's quinoa. I thought we were going
to quinoa first, yeah. So I stumbled across this. I was just thinking quinoa, when you chew it, has a really nice texture to it. Cooked quinoa. So I tried putting this in a cake, and it's brilliant. This is what gives the cake a lot of substance, but also kind of that chewy, kind of fudgy texture. So we're going to put 100 grams, which is actually quite a good chunk of quinoa. So I mean, do say healthy. This is really a very healthy cake in terms of what you're putting in your body.
And I tested this today, and you need 40 grams of raw quinoa to get 100 grams of cooked quinoa.
Yes.
More or less. I'd probably put 45 grams in, and just to be on the safe side.
That's brilliant. That's good knowledge. I always make more quinoa because I've always got it in the fridge for making salads and throwing into omelets and stuff. But yeah, it's good to know the exact amount because I never know. Okay, so this is I'm just going to quickly check my book. This is the wet ingredients. Yes. Oh, no. Missing the oil. So then,
and just asking what the powder is you added to the liquidizer, but I don't think you didn't add the powder. I think that was probably the yogurt going in.
Yes, that was yogurt. I used a spoon. Yogurt. That was yogurt, yeah. And then there's also 50 mils of, in the ingredient list, I say light olive oil, but you can use any vegetable oil or anything. And oil-based cakes, oil-based chocolate cakes are the most moist. These are really good.
Yay.
So 50 mils of that.
We've got Elizabeth asking if there's a sourdough version of this recipe.
There isn't, but you can definitely do it with the sourdough version. What I would do is I would use, for the same weight, so basically I would put in 50 grams of the sourdough, and that would take out the yogurt and a percentage of the flour. So basically 20 grams of the flour and 30 grams of the yogurt remove and put in 50 grams of the sourdough. Because sourdough will do the same thing as the yogurt. It's got the lactobacilli, so it's acidic. So you're going to get that. Yeah.
It might take a while to rise, mightn't it?
We have some very, very knowledgeable and good bakers on this call asking some brilliant questions. Okay, so we're going to whiz this up. Now, I'm not going to whiz this for too long because we're on a live here and it's going to be quite boring. But it kind of is better if you give it a good whiz to make sure it's nice and sweet. But I'm just going to do it for like 20 seconds.
Okay, let's go. Actually, while that's happening, I've just got a question about my oven, which isn't an Nova oven. This isn't an ad for a Nova, but Peter, I think it was, who asked. Yes, I do. I love it. I think it's great. Do email me, xanthi.claire@telegraph.co.uk if you want to talk about it or anything like that. Or tweet me on Twitter, @xanthi, or on Instagram, @xanthi, and talk ovens. I'm always up for ovens.
Right, before we add the wet ingredients to our dry ingredients, we're going to add our sweet potato. So sweet potato, like someone mentioned, as when you roast it and have it as a puree, this is amazing. It's so sweet and so velvety. Like I've even made like a buttercream icing in my kids' book. I make a chocolate buttercream icing that's almost entirely sweet potato puree. It is really, really impressive. But for this one, we're not using it as a puree because one of the great things about sweet potato is it falls. So the term for like when it goes soft, so it gets soft really, really easily and quickly. So
kind of breaks up, so you won't be left with little bits of sweet potato in your muffins.
No, not at all. But there is 2 other tips for that. I haven't peeled mine. Where's my peeler? Oh, here. So just going to peel that. 50 grams isn't loads. It's going to be less than half a sweet potato. But yeah, also sweet potato adds a really earthy flavor. Like chocolate goes really well with kind of earthy notes. So the sweet potato adds a few things: moisture, sweetness, earthiness. It's basically the star of the show for me. Now, the important thing is when we say grate is to finely grate. So using the big chunky part of the grater is not going to be very good. You want to use the small one.
Can I use that one?
Yes. And then my other tip is take your time, because if you go really hard at this, you're going to get it's going to be thicker pieces. If you just be really, really gentle, you're going to end up with nice thin slivers of potato.
Oh, so while you're doing that, can I ask you some more questions?
Yes, definitely.
Brilliant. We've got Carolyn asking for she use ground almonds instead of quinoa?
I have not tried that. I think you definitely could, but I'm not going to say definitively. You'd have you can test and then tell me. But I think you could. You would get less. These have got quite a chew to them. Like I said, these are kind of give a fudgy kind of muffin. And if you use ground almonds, you're going to get a bit more of a fluffy muffin. But I think that would work really well. You also can do this recipe without chocolate. So you can do it with spices and then use raisins instead of the chopped chocolate at the start. And then if you did that with ground almonds, that would be really, really good. This is good for recipe development. I need this crowd all the time in the kitchen.
And Dale's asked if the quinoa is cooked. It's definitely cooked.
Definitely has to be cooked. And actually, if it's probably slightly overcooked, it's probably a little bit better than undercooked. Right, I've nearly done mine.
And George is asking, can you use quinoa flour?
Yeah, for this one, you can use any kind of flour, really, because there's not a lot of flour in it, and it's not really that dependent on the gluten, so you can use different flours. I probably wouldn't use 100% quinoa. What's great is when some companies like Doves Farm do a gluten-free flour, and it tends to have a really nice balance of different flours. It might even include quinoa. That's probably better, or using a gluten-free flour and then just adding some of it as quinoa.
Well, N is asking, can you freeze cooked quinoa?
Yes, you definitely can, and I do that as well. I often freeze it in portions. I've got loads of, what would you do without freezers? Like with my frozen bananas, I also have portions of frozen sweet potato, because frozen sweet potato as well, the puree.
Is it cooked first? So portions of it cooked and then frozen?
Yes, yeah, exactly. Cook it first, then freeze, so you can just use it straight away. And yeah, if you use pureed sweet potato, going back to my dream ingredient, it's really good for putting in dressings, so you don't have to use so much oil. it makes a really velvety dressing, and you've got the sweetness, you've got the earthiness with some white miso as well. It's perfect. Right.
I'm so going to do that. That sounds amazing. Wow.
You know one thing I've forgotten as well, Xanthi, just before we add the liquid so that it starts the reaction, we just need to line our baking tin with the liquid.
Right, so baking tins.
So this says 10, but it's one of those ones that it does depend on the size of your banana, so it might make 11, or it could even make 9. So it's kind of, I'm gonna put 10 in. I'm gonna go with 10.
Excellent. Now you're using a tin tray there, but I've got some silicone ones as well. You know, that sort of wobbly stuff. Yeah. These aren't muffin tins, but this kind of stuff. Yeah. Do you like those too?
Yes, yeah, very much so. The thing, I'm a bit lazy sometimes, and I like using paper and tins because I don't have to wash up as much. But those silicone ones are really good. Yeah, really, really good.
Because actually, I like these silicone liners are good as well, aren't they? But they're not so good if you're going to give them away. If you're giving cakes to people, you then have to ask for cakes back, which becomes a bit of a
yeah. And you don't even have to with these as well. You could just lightly grease the pocket things, and then you could just have them straight from that. Right, we're going to add our wet ingredients now then. So this has been blended, and this is one of those things where, you know, sometimes when you're watching people bake and you get a bit kind of like, oh, I really can't stand it when people leave half the mixture still in the blender. Like, it's good. This is where a really, really nice key bit of kitchen kit, a really good, silicone spatula is so important for being able to really get all of your mixture out here, because say this is a robust recipe and it's kind of a bit fail proof, but if you only put half the mixture in, you're not going to get a proper cake. So yeah, take time to try and it doesn't have to be perfectly clean, but try and get most of it out. And then we're just going to kind of gently mix this in until it comes together to be, it's quite a thick batter. With cakes, you don't ever really want to beat the flour, because if you do that, you're going to develop the gluten too much, and that's going to make things tough. So yeah, you just want to fold it in. And you're going to have to trust me that the sweet potato does just kind of melt into the cake. You're not going to see necessarily bits of sweet potato.
Okie doke, looks good. So is there an alternative to the cooked quinoa? Could you use something else instead?
For this recipe, because I think the cooked quinoa was the kind of central thing for this recipe for me that I really liked. So I've not tried anything else. I actually tweaked other things in the recipe, but not the cooked quinoa. But someone already has given some really good advice with ground almonds. You would get a slightly different texture, but they provide a similar thing. They provide substance and then also moisture.
Fantastic.
Right.
Sue, you asked leave out all the flour. Now I think it says leave out 20 grams of flour and all the yogurt to include 50 grams of sourdough.
Yes.
Could you just buy a pouch of ready cooked quinoa? Because you see those ready cooked ones, don't you?
Exactly, you definitely can. Yes. Yeah. I actually did test with that as well. Okay, so I've just kind of folded mine together. I've got like a homogeneous mix, because I say you don't want to overmix, but you do not want to also have big clumps of flour in there, because they will not cook very well. And we're now just going to fill. Now, sometimes when you make these kind of cakes, sometimes you want to fill it only about halfway, because the cake really rises and puffs fluffy out of it. This is more of a substantial cake, so you can fill these ones at least 3/4.
Okay.
They should crest nicely. Basically, when I did them 3/4 earlier today, I got buns like this, so like a nice coming over the top.
Yeah, excellent.
Can you smell the chocolate, Xanthi? Is this already giving you the chocolate hit?
It's definitely smelling chocolatey. It's smelling fantastic. And Gianni just asked when we add the sweet potato, that goes in with the dry ingredients, doesn't it?
Yes, just at the end, yeah, just before we're adding all the wet ingredients, really.
And Maureen's just asking if we could use beetroot instead of sweet potato.
Yeah, actually, I have tried with various different root vegetables, you definitely, if you're using something that's not sweet potato, you really have to make sure that you're finely, like I say, finely grating. And when I said like being really gentle, so you're really getting it really fine. And I've tried it with swede, I've tried it with carrot, I've tried it with beetroot. So yeah, you can use lots of different root vegetables. It's one of those funny things as well. You know how carrot cake is such a well-known cake. With carrot cake, you can switch that for just about any root vegetable, and it tastes delicious. And we always go with carrot. So yeah, that's try different things, people.
Excellent. And Leanne from China is saying, isn't olive oil a so much healthier alternative to, I guess, other oils, or to butter, or
the light olive oil,
or just the olive oil generally?
Yes, yeah. Olive oil has it's monounsaturated fats, so it's really, really very good, because not only does it increase your kind of the good cholesterol, your HDL, it also reduces your LDL, your bad cholesterol. So olive oil is particularly good. But other vegetable oils are still good. They're polyunsaturated, so they still do kind of give a good hit for the good cholesterol.
Fantastic.
So I should say my healthy thing. I actually am a health professional in my day job. So I like health is. It's not just about making healthy food for me. It's kind of like the whole healthy lifestyle and balance of diet and things.
Yeah. Which is so true, isn't it? It's about getting exercise and eating with other people if you can, and all of those good things. Could you use a food processor to grate the sweet potato? Because she's assuming it's raw. It is raw. And could you use roasted flesh of sweet potato or sweet potato puree instead?
Yeah, I haven't tried a food processor. I'm sure you can. Lots of people use food processors whenever something says kind of grated or grinding nuts and things. So I'm sure you can. If you're someone that's used to doing that, then I'm sure that'll work well. And yeah, I've actually not tried it with the pureed sweet potato flesh, but I'm sure you could. That's something you could try.
Yeah. And I just got a question about my scales, mate. It's a make called My Way, but I got it from a company called Bakery Bits. It's just bakerybits.co.uk, or it might be bakerybits.com. And they cost a little bit more, but not that much more. But you never have to buy batteries, which I like, because I always forget to buy them.
Can we give a shout out to Bakery Bits, Sandy? Bakery Bits.
Sorry?
Can we give a shout out to Bakery Bits? They are
great. Yeah.
Brilliant. I've got this orange oil, and they also have an oil which is called Aroma di Panettone, which is the mix for panettone. They are the best oils, best flavored oils I've got, and they will be great in this actually, because yeah, adding a flavored oil to this would be really good on one of the extracts.
Yum.
Right, yeah. I've done 11 in the end. My mix definitely fit with 11.
Yeah, I'm making it 11 as well. In fact, I'm thinking I could have spread it around 12. They look quite full to me, but
yeah, I've gone quite full. Maybe I'm probably being a bit greedy for the pot.
No, you can have really generous muffins. I like that.
Yeah.
Oh gosh, a couple of people, Judith and Catherine, both saying that they find silicone bakeware a bit tricky to use. They can't get stuck on when it doesn't come out properly, or it's raw on the inside and overcooked on the edges. Any tips?
I'm not that practiced with it. I do find I have some issues with it. I find as well with certain cakes, if you're trying to push them out, it kind of wrecks the cake as you push it if it's quite a light cake. So I do prefer tins and metal myself.
It's not such a good conductor either of heat.
Yeah, but I've got friends that use the silicone all the time and love it. I tend to use silicone when it's things like setting, for jellies and things like that. Not so much actually for cake.
Right. And my little grandson has severe dairy and egg allergies. Can these be made vegan?
Yes, you don't have to. There's really good yogurts now, like the Alpro, like soy yogurts and things. Removing the egg, you can add more banana, or what you can do, a really great thing that I learned from Dan Leppard, is you can whiz the oil that you've got. If you whiz the oil with 4 dates, it gives this really gloopy consistency, which actually is quite like the kind of the egg white, the binding part. So Yeah, you can add 4 dates and whiz into the oil, or you can add more banana. And if you add probably a teaspoon of ground flaxseed as well, which is also called ground linseed, because that's a seed that gets really gluey when it gets liquid in it.
Yeah, I've seen that used a lot in that kind of in vegan baking.
Right, I think we're ready to go in, Xanthi.
Are you giving it a little shake?
I'm going to give it a little shake and a little tap just to get them a little bit even. And we're putting in at 200 degrees, which is really hot for a cake. But as soon as it goes
That's
in...
200 degrees fan, isn't it? So that really is quite hot. That's like 220.
Yeah. So as soon as it goes in, you turn it down to 150. And I'll explain why in a second.
Here it goes.
The reason we do that is because with cakes, one, you're getting the raising agent that's kind of having that reaction with the carbon dioxide. But the other thing that gives a good lift is the steam. So you want it to have a really good blast of heat at the start to give a really good lift to your cakes. But to actually bake it, you do need to turn it down because otherwise they'll burn too quickly. So they're going to be hit with a 200 degrees, but most of the baking is actually going to be at 150 fan.
That's a good tip. Is that how? Because I've always struggled to get my muffins to do that real kind of muffin top. Yes. Is this going to really help with that?
These aren't muffin top muffins either, though. That's also the type of muffin. For those ones, it's really good to do an oil-based cake without any butter if you're doing a different type of muffin. So I'm going to set. Sorry, I do my timer with Alexa. I don't know if that's. She helped. Oh. I don't have a time. Alexa, timer 12 minutes. So we do it for 12 to 15 minutes. So it depends. So when I made them earlier, I definitely needed 15 minutes. But it's, like I say, it's one of those cakes that if you use a cocktail stick, do you still say? Oh, toothpick, people say, don't they? A toothpick or a cocktail stick to see if they're baked. But I tend to, if these are slightly underbaked, then they're just more chewy and chocolatey. So it's actually fine.
Yeah. And it says, can you bake all cakes? Stuart's asking that way. Is it a good idea for all cakes to put them in really hot and then turn the oven down?
I tend to. The only ones that you wouldn't want to do that for are cakes that have a very high sugar content, because the sugar is what caramelizes. So your cake is gonna get too brown. So yes, I would do it more for cakes that don't have a very high sugar content.
Okay.
Now, can I quickly give a couple of tips on toppings, because I know we're running short on time. Yeah. The book, I just said to add honey. So you can just glaze them with honey. And that's a really simple topping that just gives like a little bit of sweetness for the first kind of mouthfeel. But another thing you can do is to finely grate, like if you've got one of the microplaners, if you finely grate some more chocolate, so you glaze it with the honey and then you sprinkle really finely grated chocolate on. I love that because you get such a rich chocolate taste first because all over your lips, and then you get the cake afterwards. But if you want to make these slightly less healthy but more indulgent and delicious, so if this is for you doing it for someone who's coming to stay, then I would use buttercream. Like, there's nothing wrong with doing a really nice chocolatey buttercream and giving a good mound of that on top.
Yum, sounds delicious. So would you let them cool before you put the honey on, or do you put the honey on while they're still hot?
So if you're just glazing with the honey, then you can put them on when it's still warm. That's absolutely fine. I still leave them to go a little bit cool because otherwise the honey becomes too liquid and kind of spreads right out. Whereas if you want it to give a nice glaze, then it's actually better if they're just a little bit warm. But if you're going to put the grated chocolate on top, or if you're going to do a buttercream, you do want to let them cool because they'll just melt straight away.
Excellent. And Rosemary's asking, how quickly does the oven cool down to 150? Will it be different with a fan oven?
Yeah, I think that is a good question, actually. I think if you've got a modern oven, then the fans are very good and it happens really quite quickly. You will notice because usually like often ovens have an oven light that tells you when it's at the temperature it should be at. But if you're not using a fan oven and you're trying without a fan oven, it's probably safer just to go with the standard temperature right from the start, and it'll still be absolutely fine.
I've got quite a whizzy oven that's telling me, and it's still heading down to 150, and we're 3 minutes in. So I think it's going to hit just after 3 minutes. It's going to hit 150.
Cool. That's really good to know.
So, but I think that will vary from oven to oven. And that's the thing, isn't it? It's so variable. It's not a precise science. We're not working with laboratory equipment.
And that's the tough thing, and that's what we say about experimental, because even different flour types, like if you're in a different country, different types of fruits and vegetables and things, different varieties, like these things change everything. So like with your yogurt, you'll have different levels of fat, like some will be 40%, some will be 10%, or people even have 0 fat. So yeah, and the same with ovens, like it really does change. So you might have to tweak recipes slightly. But that's the fun of baking as well, I think.
Fantastic. And we haven't, just very quickly, we haven't asked about Bake Off. Have you got a favourite in the new series?
Yes, I do. It's always, yeah, I love Giuseppe.
Oh,
I think he's amazing. But do you know, this year, because I am not going to lie, like I have years where I don't like people, and would never say it on Twitter or any public place, but I'll sit in my own living room and be like, oh, this person's so annoying. This year, they are all delightful. I genuinely love them all this year. So yeah, it's going to be quite horrible seeing them go each week.
Oh, I know.
How about you? Who do you like, Santi?
Oh, well, I'm sort of torn. I quite like Christelle. I think she's doing some good stuff.
She's cool as well. Christelle seems very cool.
Yeah, and I've forgotten his name, the German guy.
Yeah,
because he's so precise, isn't he?
He is my number 2. I think he's
kind of
so
cool.
Unassuming but brilliant. So yeah, he's my number 2. I want him to get to the final.
I think he will. That's what my money's on him, because Vorsprung don't Technique or something.
In fact, just for today, I'm actually wearing the apron I wore in the Bake Off final. And I've
the actual apron.
Yeah, I've never washed it, so it's actually still got. It shows how clean I was in the tent because there's only very small stains on it. I actually ended up pretty unscathed. But yeah, I actually store my apron every single week. But and I gave them to other friends, and this is the only one I've kept. Is the one from the final. I never washed it.
I never washed it. That's fantastic.
So
what's the secret to a tidy kitchen when you're cooking? You're pretty tidy there, actually, I have to say.
Yeah, 2 things. Well, 3 things. 1, preparation, making sure you've got things all prepared so you're not just like flying around. 2, doing some cleaning up as you go along. 3, making sure your sink and all your washing up has already been done before you start, so you're not just adding loads and loads on top. And if I was going to get a 4, you would say get someone to like be cleaning up after you as you go. I mean, if they're going to be eating the cakes, they should probably be joining in and helping with the cleaning.
Brilliant. So have you got any, did you bake some ahead, did you say? Or are we just going to see? Should we have a look at those?
I baked some ahead. So yeah, these are, I mean, if you count, you will see there's definitely not 11 in front of me because I've already eaten a couple. But yeah, so these are the.
You hold it right up. Oh yeah.
That
looks really witchy.
And you don't have the sweet potato bits, but it's really moist. Like it's one of those cakes as well that can last. Some things you bake and it's delicious, and even 2 hours later you're like, oh, it's tasting a bit stale. These last, and if they've even gone a bit stale, if you just ping them for 5 seconds in a microwave or 10 seconds, they go so soft. They go like a chocolate pudding.
And very good question from M. What's the best way to store them once they've cooled?
Yeah, once they're cooled, I've got like this big Tupperware that I store my cakes in. That's what I prefer to do. But yeah, I think that
they're not in the fridge, just on the side.
Yeah, I just do them on the side. But I do think these are these store well. Like I think you could probably just leave them out and.
Is that an oil thing again? I always think oil cakes seem to keep well.
Exactly. Yeah, oil-based cakes stay moist for a lot longer. Yeah.
Brilliant. Well, they look absolutely amazing. Mine are rising. I don't know if you can see them in there, rising up, so they're looking good. And so I'm really excited about rubbing them with a little bit of honey and some grated chocolate and everything when they're finished. And that's been absolutely amazing. Thank you so much. And have you enjoyed yourself, David?
I have loved it. Time has flown by. I wish I could have everyone in my kitchen. I love doing these things.
It's great. It's kind of almost like that, though. It's been so fantastic having all these questions coming up.
I was going to say that the quality of the questions, I've been quite surprised. I've done a lot of these bake-alongs, and I've never had this many good songs.
I know. They know that stuff. They're brilliant. Yeah. You are all brilliant, I should say. Thank you so much, David. That's been amazing.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. Thank you.